What if a birthday present could start a war? Could a simple necklace bring down an entire monarchy and send a queen to the guillotine? How do you react when your husband gives you a palace, but with it, the hatred of an entire nation? These are not just stories, they are the legacies of gifts between kings and queens, gifts so lavish and so charged with meaning, they change the course of history. We think a new car or a fancy watch is a big deal. But the presents exchanged by royalty were on another level. They weren't just objects. They were declarations of power, desperate pleas for love, and sometimes beautiful glittering mistakes that cost thousands their lives. Number 19, how can a single piece of jewelry define a 63-year reign? Prince Albert bought a sapphire and diamond brooch for his fiancée Victoria the day before their wedding in 1840. The price was £400. That's about 500,000 pounds today, or over $500,000 US. The central sapphire was a deep blue and weighed over 10 carats, surrounded by 12 large diamonds. Victoria was not just a girl getting married. She was the 20-year-old queen of the United Kingdom. This gift was more than just a pre-wedding present. Victoria and Albert's relationship was unusual for royalty. She was the one with the power. She proposed to him, not the other way around. Their marriage was a genuine love match, not just a political alliance. Albert knew he was marrying a monarch, a woman who already had everything. So his gift had to be personal. He chose a sapphire to match the color of her eyes. The maker was Gerard, the official crown jeweler. This wasn't something picked up from a shop. It was a serious, bespoke commission. Victoria wore it the next day for her wedding. She pinned it to the front of her white satin dress. It was her. Something blue. This act connected the brooch to her forever. It wasn't just another piece in the royal collection. It was her brooch, the one from Albert. She wore it constantly throughout their 21 years of marriage. It appeared in official portraits, at state functions, and in private moments. When you see paintings of a young Queen Victoria, you can often spot the brooch. Then, in 1861, Albert died suddenly of typhoid fever. Victoria was devastated. She plunged into a deep state of mourning that lasted for the rest of her life. She wore black every day for 40 years. It was a stark public display of her grief. But even in her black mourning clothes, she wore color. She wore Albert's brooch. Pinned against the black crepe of her dresses, the deep blue sapphire stood out. It was a constant, visible link to the husband she had lost. It was her way of keeping him with her. Before she died, Victoria made a specific decree. She designated the Prince Albert brooch as an heirloom of the crown. This was a special legal status. It meant the brooch could not be sold or given away by future monarchs. It belonged to the crown itself, to be passed down from one monarch to the next forever. This act secured its legacy. It was no longer just her personal treasure, it became a piece of British history. After Victoria's death, every single reigning queen and queen consort has worn it. Queen Alexandra, Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and Queen Elizabeth II all wore it regularly. And Elizabeth II was particularly fond of it. She wore it to major events, including her Christmas broadcasts and garden parties. For her, it was likely a connection to her great-great-grandmother, another long-reigning female monarch. The brooch sits in the Royal Collection Trust today. It is more than just a beautiful object. It is a piece of a love story, a symbol of lifelong grief, and a direct physical link connecting 5 generations of British queens. A simple gift, given the day before a wedding, ended up defining a monarch and an era. Number 18, what happens when your escape becomes your prison? In 1774, King Louis XVI gave his wife, Marie Antoinette, a key. This wasn't just any key. It was the key to the Petit Trianon, a small chateau on the grounds of the Palace of Versailles. He was 20, she was 19. His words to her were, "You love flowers, so I have a bouquet to give you, the little Trianon." This was an unprecedented gift. A French queen had never before owned property in her own right. The palace and everything in it was now hers. The Petit Trianon was meant to be an escape. Life at the main court of Versailles was a nightmare of etiquette. The queen was never alone. Dozens of people watched her wake up, get dressed, eat her meals, and go to bed. Every action was prescribed by centuries of tradition. Marie Antoinette, an Austrian archduchess, hated it. She found it stifling and ridiculous. The Petit Trianon was her sanctuary. It was a place where she could be herself, away from the prying eyes of the court. Louis XVI even gave her a rule to go with the gift. The King of France could not enter the Petit Trianon or its grounds without her personal invitation. This was an incredible grant of autonomy. It made her world separate from his. She immediately began to transform the place. She had the formal gardens ripped out and replaced with a more fashionable, natural-looking English-style garden with a grotto and a small temple dedicated to love. She redecorated the chateau in the latest neoclassical style, full of light colors and delicate furniture. The cost was enormous. Renovating the chateau and gardens alone cost over 2 million livres. That's difficult to translate exactly, but it was a fortune, equivalent to many millions of dollars today. But she didn't stop there. She then built a whole fake peasant village on the grounds, the Hameau de la Reine, or the Queen's Hamlet. Had a working farm, a dairy, a mill, and a dozen rustic-looking cottages. Here, she and her friends would dress up as shepherdesses and milkmaids and pretend to live a simple pastoral life. The cows were washed and groomed daily, and their horns were gilded. The milk pails were made of fine Sèvres porcelain. This gift, meant as an act of love from a well-meaning but weak-willed king, turned into a public relations disaster. The exclusivity of the Petit Trianon bred resentment. Courtiers who were denied entry felt snubbed and spread malicious rumors. The public, who were struggling with poverty and a failing economy, heard stories of the Queen's extravagant spending and her fantasy farm. They saw her as frivolous, out of touch, and wasteful. The simple life of the Hameau was seen as a mockery of the real struggles of the French peasantry. The Petit Trianon became a symbol of everything that was wrong with the monarchy. It fueled the revolutionary pamphlets that depicted the Queen as a decadent foreigner who cared nothing for the French people. The gift that was meant to be her escape became the evidence used against her. It was her private world, but it created a very public problem. When the revolution came, the mob marched on Versailles, screaming for the Queen. The privacy and freedom she had cherished at the Petit Trianon were gone forever. The key her husband gave her didn't just unlock a palace. It helped unlock the fury of a nation. Number 17, can you buy love with a cursed diamond? The Orlov Diamond weighs 189.62 carats. It is the size of half a hen's egg and has a slight bluish-green tint. Its history is one of theft, murder, and desperation. In the 18th century, it was one of the two eyes of the statue of a Hindu deity, Sri Ranganathaswamy, in a temple in southern India. A French deserter from the Carnatic Wars heard about the diamond. He converted to Hinduism and spent years as a lowly acolyte at the temple, slowly gaining the trust of the priests. One stormy night, he pried the diamond eye from the statue's socket and fled. He made his way to Madras, a British-controlled city, and sold the stone to an English sea captain for £2,000. The captain then sold it in London for £12,000. The diamond passed through several more hands, its value increasing each time, until it ended up in Amsterdam, the center of the European diamond trade. There, in 1774, it was purchased by a Russian nobleman, Count Grigory Orlov. Orlov was the former lover of Empress Catherine the Great of Russia. He had been instrumental in the coup that put her on the throne, and for years he was her favorite and the most powerful man in Russia. They had an illegitimate son together, but Catherine was famously fickle. By the 1770s, her affections had shifted to a new, younger man, Grigory Potemkin. Orlov was cast aside. He was desperate to win back her favor. He thought a grand gesture, an impossibly extravagant gift, was the way to do it. He heard about the legendary diamond in Amsterdam and decided he had to have it. He paid a reported 400,000 Dutch florins for it, a staggering sum at the time, equivalent to tens of millions of dollars today. He took the diamond back to St. Petersburg and presented it to Catherine on her name day. The gift was a sensation. Nothing like it had ever been seen at the Russian court. It was a bold public attempt to buy his way back into her bed and into power. But it failed. Catherine accepted the magnificent gift. She was a passionate collector of gems and art, and she could not refuse such a stone. She named it after him, the Orlov Diamond. She had her court jewelers set it into the top of the imperial scepter of Russia. But She did not take Orlov back. She kept the diamond, but she kept Potemkin as her lover. Orlov's grand gesture was a spectacular failure. He had spent a fortune on a gift meant to rekindle a romance, but all it got him was a polite thank you. The Empress he had helped create was now too powerful and too independent to be bought. She incorporated his gift into the symbols of her own authority, effectively making his personal plea a state treasure. The Orlov Diamond remains in the Romanov imperial scepter to this day. It is housed in the Kremlin Armory in Moscow, part of the Diamond Fund. It is a massive, beautiful stone born of sacrilege and theft, and a permanent monument to a broken heart and a very bad investment. Number 16, is it possible to build a palace for a fairy? In 1924, a massive doll's house was presented to Queen Mary, the wife of King George V. This was not a child's toy. Queen Mary's doll's house was a perfect 1/12 scale model of a grand aristocratic London home. It was designed by one of the most famous architects of the day, Sir Edwin Lutyens. It took 4 years and 1,500 craftsmen, artists, and manufacturers to complete. The house is a time capsule of 1920s high society. Everything in it works. The elevators run, the lights, powered by electricity, switch on and off. The taps in the 5 bathrooms run with hot and cold water. The toilets even flush. In the kitchen, there is a tiny set of scales that is fully functional, and a mouse trap that actually snaps shut. The garage contains a fleet of 7 miniature luxury cars, including a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, with engines that have moving pistons. The level of detail is almost unbelievable. The library is filled with over 200 miniature books, handwritten and bound by their actual authors and publishers. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a brand new Sherlock Holmes story specifically for the house. Rudyard Kipling and Thomas Hardy contributed tiny volumes of their poetry. There are miniature newspapers, timetables, and even tiny boxes of Swan Vestas matches. The wine cellar is stocked with 1,200 real miniature bottles of wine and spirits, each filled with a single drop of the real thing from famous vintners like Chateau Lafite Rothschild. The art collection is just as impressive. Over 750 artists provided miniature paintings, drawings, and prints to hang on the walls. There are tiny etchings and watercolors by famous artists of the period. The Queen's bedroom has a canopy bed with perfectly stitched linens. The King's study has a working miniature gramophone that plays God Save the King. Even the less glamorous parts of the house are perfect. Below stairs, in the servants' quarters, there is a scullery with real soap and a box of Brillo pads the size of a fingernail. The gift was conceived as a way to showcase the best of British craftsmanship after the devastation of World War I. It was a national project, a gift from the people to their queen, organized and funded by her cousin, Princess Marie Louise. Queen Mary was a serious and meticulous collector, known for her love of miniatures. This was the ultimate miniature. When it was completed, it was exhibited at the British Empire Exhibition in 1924, where it was seen by 1.6 million people. It was then installed permanently at Windsor Castle, where it remains on public display today. It is more than just a doll's house. It is a masterpiece of artistry and engineering. It is a historical document preserving a vision of a world that was already beginning to disappear. The gift was not just an object of immense beauty and complexity. It was a tribute to a queen's passion and a nation's skill. It was a gift that captured an entire world in miniature. Number 15, why would a king give his queen an entire fleet of ships? Around 1479 BC, Hatshepsut was the pharaoh of Egypt. She was one of the very few women to rule as pharaoh in her own right, and her reign was one of peace and prosperity. Instead of waging wars, she focused on building projects and re-establishing trade networks that had been disrupted by foreign invasions. Her greatest achievement in this area was a massive trading expedition she sent to the Land of Punt. Punt was a mysterious, semi-mythical place. Historians believe it was located somewhere on the coast of East Africa, possibly in modern-day Somalia, Djibouti, or Eritrea. To the Egyptians, it was a land of wonders, a source of exotic and precious goods. The journey there was long and dangerous, across the desert to the Red Sea and then by ship south. Hatshepsut commissioned a fleet of 5 massive ships for the expedition. Each was over 70 feet long and was rowed by 30 sailors. The ships were loaded with Egyptian goods for trade tools, weapons, beads, and other trinkets. The goal was not conquest, but commerce. This entire expedition was, in a sense, a gift to herself as ruler and to the gods of Egypt. She presented it as a divine mission ordained by the god Amun. The expedition was a huge success. The ships returned to Egypt laden with the treasures of Punt. They brought back vast quantities of myrrh, a fragrant resin that was essential for Egyptian religious rituals. They also brought back frankincense, ebony, ivory, gold, and exotic animals like monkeys and giraffes. But the most remarkable part of the cargo was 31 living myrrh trees, their roots carefully packed in baskets. This was the first recorded attempt in history to transplant foreign trees. Hatshepsut had the trees planted in the gardens of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. This temple was her masterpiece, a stunning terrace structure built into a cliff face. The story of the expedition to Punt was carved and painted in meticulous detail on the walls of the temple's porticos. The reliefs show the ships setting sail, the Egyptians trading with the people of Punt, who are depicted with dark skin and living in huts on stilts, and the fleet returning home with its precious cargo. The entire venture was a gift that solidified Hatshepsut's legitimacy as pharaoh. It demonstrated her ability to bring prosperity and divine favor to Egypt. It was a public spectacle of her power and piety. The frankincense and myrrh pleased the gods. The gold enriched the treasury, and the story on her temple walls ensured that her achievement would be remembered for eternity. The fleet itself was temporary, but the gift it brought back, the trade connections, the wealth, and the story of a successful female pharaoh's greatest triumph, lasted for generations. She didn't just give herself a few trinkets, she gave her country access to a whole new world of wealth. Number 14. How could an Easter egg contain a trans-Siberian train? Between 1885 and 1916, the Russian imperial family had a unique Easter tradition. Every year, Tsar Alexander III and later his son Tsar Nicholas II would commission a jeweled Easter egg from the master goldsmith Peter Carl Fabergé as a gift for the Tsarina. A total of 50 of these imperial Fabergé eggs were made. They were the ultimate expression of luxury and craftsmanship. The tradition started in 1885. Tsar Alexander III wanted a special Easter gift for his wife, Empress Maria Feodorovna. He ordered an egg from Fabergé, a respected but not yet world-famous jeweler. The design was simple. On the outside, it looked like a plain white enamel hen's egg, but it opened up to reveal a yolk of matte yellow gold. The yolk itself opened to reveal a multicolored gold hen sitting on a bed of golden straw. The hen could also be opened, and inside were 2 tiny surprises, a diamond miniature of the imperial crown and a ruby pendant. The Empress was so delighted that the Tsar immediately placed a standing order for 1 egg every Easter. The only rule was that each egg had to be unique and contain a surprise. The eggs became more and more elaborate over the years. They were made of gold, silver, platinum, and decorated with enamel, diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and pearls. The surprises inside grew more complex and personal. 1 egg, the Lilies of the Valley egg from 1898, was a beautiful pink enamel egg covered in pearls and diamond-studded lilies. The surprise was 3 miniature portraits of Tsar Nicholas II and his 2 oldest daughters, Olga and Tatiana, which rose out of the top of the egg when a pearl button was twisted. Perhaps the most technically astonishing egg was the Trans-Siberian Railway egg given by Nicholas II to his wife Tsarina Alexandra Feodorovna in 1900. The egg was made of silver, onyx, and quartz. A map of the Trans-Siberian Railway was engraved across the silver shell. The surprise inside was a perfect miniature replica of the new Russian steam train. The train was made of gold and platinum. It had a diamond headlight and ruby marker lights. It consisted of a locomotive and 5 carriages with rock crystal windows through which you could see tiny engravings of the carriage interiors. And, incredibly, the train had a tiny gold key that could be used to wind it up, causing the locomotive to actually run. These eggs were intensely personal gifts. They often commemorated important events in the family's life, like the birth of a child or an anniversary. They were private treasures seen only by the imperial family and their closest circle, but they were also symbols of the immense wealth and power of the Romanov dynasty, created at a time when most of the Russian population lived in extreme poverty. The tradition ended abruptly with the Russian Revolution in 1917. The Tsar and his family were executed and their palaces were ransacked. The Fabergé eggs were confiscated by the new Bolshevik government. Many were sold off to Western buyers in the 1920s and 30s to raise money for the state. Of the 50 imperial eggs, 43 are known to survive today. They are scattered in museums and private collections around the world, with the largest single collection held by the Kremlin Armory. Each one is a breathtaking work of art, but also a poignant relic of a lost world and a family that met a tragic end. The tiny, perfect train, hidden inside a silver egg, was a gift of love in a world that was about to be torn apart. Number 13, can a pile of rocks change the world? In 1486, a Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus approached Queen Isabella I of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon, the joint rulers of Spain. He had a radical idea. He believed he could reach the rich spice markets of the East Indies by sailing west across the Atlantic, a journey no one had ever attempted. He had already pitched his idea to the King of Portugal, who had turned him down. Now he was asking Spain for the money to fund his voyage. For 6 years, the Spanish court debated the proposal. Columbus's calculations were questioned by scholars. The venture was seen as incredibly risky and expensive. Spain was in the middle of the Reconquista, the long and costly war to drive the Moors out of the Iberian Peninsula. There was simply no money to spare for such a speculative project. The court repeatedly rejected Columbus's plan. Finally, in early 1492, the last Moorish stronghold of Granada fell to Spanish forces. The war was over. With the treasury empty, but the nation unified and victorious, Isabella was in a position to look outwards. As Columbus made his final appeal, legend has it that the queen was so moved by his passion that she offered to pawn her own crown jewels to finance the expedition. While this is likely an exaggeration, it captures the spirit of her commitment. In reality, the funding was more complex, coming from a combination of royal funds, private Italian investors, and a loan secured by the crown. The key point is that Isabella made the final decision. She saw the potential. It was a massive gamble. The gift she gave Columbus was not just money. It was royal patronage, ships, men, and the authority of the Spanish crown. She gave him 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. She gave him a crew of about 90 men. And she gave him a royal commission, promising him the title of Admiral of the Ocean Sea and a 10% share of any riches he found. This was a gift not to a person, but to an idea. It was an investment in a dream, and it paid off on a scale that no one could have imagined. When Columbus returned in 1493, having landed in the Americas, which he mistakenly believed to be Asia, he brought back gold, exotic plants, and several captive Native Americans. He had not found a new route to the Indies, but he had stumbled upon something far more significant, a new world. Isabella's gift of 3 small ships had given Spain a colonial empire. It unleashed a wave of exploration and conquest that would reshape the globe. The gold and silver that flowed from the Americas would make Spain the richest and most powerful nation in Europe for over a century. It also led to the devastation of indigenous populations and the brutal realities of colonization. The decision made by Queen Isabella was one of the most consequential in human history. It wasn't a diamond or a palace. It was a calculated risk, a state-sponsored venture fund for one of the most ambitious projects ever conceived. The gift was a few wooden ships and a royal blessing. The return on investment was an entire hemisphere. Number 12. What does it take to build a tomb for the Queen of the World? In 1631, Mumtaz Mahal, the favorite wife of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, died while giving birth to their 14th child. The emperor was consumed by grief. He had been inseparable from his wife, and her death broke him. He went into mourning for 2 years, and when he emerged, his hair had turned white. He decided to build a tomb for her that would be unrivaled in beauty anywhere in the world, a monument that would be worthy of his love. The gift was the Taj Mahal. This was not a gift to a living person, but a memorial, a final, ultimate present for his deceased queen. The name itself means crown of the palace. Shah Jahan spared no expense. He brought in the finest materials and craftsmen from all over the Mughal Empire and beyond. The main structure is built of white marble, which was quarried in Makrana, over 250 miles away, and transported to the site by a fleet of over 1,000 elephants. The construction took 22 years and involved more than 20,000 workers, including masons, stonecutters, carvers, painters, and calligraphers. The chief architect is believed to be Ustad Ahmad Lahori. The design blends elements of Persian, Indian, and Islamic architecture into a perfectly symmetrical whole. The central dome is 240 feet high and is surrounded by 4 slender minarets. The decoration is what makes the Taj Mahal so extraordinary. The white marble is inlaid with 28 different types of precious and semi-precious stones, forming intricate patterns of flowers and calligraphy. Jade and crystal came from China, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, turquoise from Tibet, sapphires from Sri Lanka, and carnelian from Arabia. The calligraphy that adorns the grand arches are verses from the Quran, primarily dealing with themes of judgment and paradise. The cost of building the Taj Mahal was astronomical. Estimates vary, but it is thought to have cost around 32 million rupees at the time. In today's money, this would be close to $1 billion US. It was a project that consumed a significant portion of the Mughal treasury. The complex is not just the mausoleum itself, it includes a main gateway, a mosque, a guest house, and extensive gardens with a long reflecting pool. The symmetry is perfect. The mosque on one side is balanced by an identical building, the Jawab or answer on the other, built purely for architectural balance. Shah Jahan intended to build a second, identical mausoleum for himself on the other side of the Yamuna River, made of black marble and connected to the Taj Mahal by a bridge. This would have doubled the cost and the grandeur, but he was deposed by his son, Aurangzeb, before he could begin construction. Shah Jahan spent the last 8 years of his life under house arrest in the Agra fort with a view of the Taj Mahal from his window. When he died, he was buried next to his beloved Mumtaz Mahal, in the one slight disruption to the perfect symmetry of the crypt. The Taj Mahal is often called the greatest monument ever built for love. It was a gift of overwhelming grief and devotion, an emperor's attempt to build a heaven on earth for his queen. It bankrupted an empire and became one of the most recognizable and beautiful buildings in the world. Number 11. How do you give someone a living painting? Empress Josephine, the first wife of Napoleon Bonaparte, was passionate about botany. When Napoleon was away on his military campaigns, she retreated to her private estate, the Château de Malmaison, just outside Paris. Napoleon bought the rundown property for her in 1799. He thought the price was too high, but he gave it to her anyway. It became her personal project, her refuge, and the place where she would create one of the most famous gardens in the world. Josephine's gift to herself and to France was her rose garden. She was determined to collect every known species of rose in the world and plant them at Malmaison. This was an ambitious goal. She used Napoleon's vast political and military network to achieve it. French ambassadors, generals, and naval officers were instructed to find and send back new varieties of roses from every corner of the expanding French Empire and beyond. Ships were sometimes ordered to break naval blockades just to deliver a rare plant to the Empress. Even during the Napoleonic Wars, her great rival, the English, allowed her shipments of plants to pass through their blockades. Such was the respect for her scientific project. By 1814, her garden at Malmaison contained around 250 different types of roses. This was the largest and most comprehensive collection in the world at the time. She had roses from China, Persia, and the Americas. She wasn't just a collector, she was a patron of botanical science. She hired horticulturists who worked on hybridizing new varieties, creating many new rose cultivars that are still grown today. But Josephine wanted more than just a living collection. She wanted to record it for posterity. To do this, she commissioned the greatest botanical artist of the age, Pierre-Joseph Redoute. Between 1817 and 1824, Redoute produced a series of stunningly beautiful and scientifically accurate watercolor paintings of the roses of Malmaison. These were published in a magnificent 3-volume book called Less Roses. Less Roses was a masterpiece of both art and science. It contained 170 plates, each one a life-sized, exquisitely detailed portrait of a rose from Josephine's garden. The publication was incredibly expensive, produced using a complex stipple engraving technique that was then finished by hand with watercolor. It was a gift to the world, a permanent record of a garden that was, by its nature, temporary. Okay, after Napoleon divorced her in 1810, Josephine remained at Malmaison. The garden was her life's work. It was her legacy. The roses she collected and the books she commissioned had a profound impact on horticulture. They helped to popularize rose growing across Europe and laid the groundwork for the development of many modern rose varieties. The gift was not just a plot of land or a collection of flowers. It was a living museum, a scientific laboratory, and the subject of one of the most beautiful botanical books ever created. It was a gift born of a deep personal passion that ended up enriching the world. Number 10, could a diamond necklace topple a throne? This is a story about a gift that was never actually given and never even received by the queen it was intended for. Yet it destroyed her reputation and helped pave the way for the French Revolution. The queen was Marie Antoinette. The gift was a diamond necklace of unimaginable opulence. The necklace was originally commissioned around 1772 by King Louis XV for his mistress, Madame du Barry. He ordered it from the Parisian jewelers Baumer and Bassenger. They spent years gathering the perfect stones. The final piece consisted of 647 flawless diamonds, weighing a total of 2,800 carats. It was a cascade of pendants, festoons, and tassels, the most extravagant piece of jewelry made in the 18th century. But before it was finished, Louis XV died of smallpox. Madame du Barry was banished from court, and the jewelers were left with a very expensive necklace and no buyer. They tried to sell it to the new queen, Marie Antoinette, but she refused. The price was 1.6 million livres, an insane amount of money, roughly equivalent to the annual budget of the French Navy, or well over $100 million today. The queen, already criticized for her spending, reportedly said, "We have more need of battleships than of necklaces." This is where the story gets complicated. A con artist named Jeanne de la Motte saw an opportunity. She was a descendant of an illegitimate son of a French king and craved a return to aristocratic life. She befriended the Cardinal de Rohan, a powerful and ambitious churchman who was desperate to get into the queen's good graces. Rohan had fallen out of favor with the queen and was banned from her presence. Jeanne de la Motte convinced the cardinal that she was a close confidante of the queen. She began passing forged letters from the queen to Rohan, slowly convincing him that Marie Antoinette secretly wanted to be his friend and patron. The letters eventually claimed that the queen desperately wanted the diamond necklace but could not buy it publicly. She asked if the cardinal would act as her secret intermediary, buying the necklace on her behalf. She would then pay him back in installments. Rohan, blinded by his ambition, fell for the scam completely. He met with a prostitute hired by Jeanne to impersonate the queen in a moonlit grove at Versailles. The fake queen gave him a rose and a few words of encouragement. Convinced of the queen's favor, Rohan went to the jewelers and signed a contract to buy the necklace. He handed it over to Jeanne de la Motte, believing she would deliver it to the queen. Instead, Jeanne's husband took the necklace to London, broke it up, and began selling off the magnificent diamonds individually. When the first payment came due and wasn't made, the jewelers went directly to the queen. Marie Antoinette was baffled. She had no idea what they were talking about. The whole scheme unraveled. The cardinal was arrested in his full vestments at Versailles, creating a massive public scandal. A public trial followed. In the end, Jeanne de la Motte was convicted, but the Cardinal de Rohan was acquitted. This was a disaster for the monarchy. The public did not believe that the cardinal, a prince of the church, could be so easily duped. They assumed he was telling the truth and that the queen really had been involved in a scheme to defraud the jewelers. They believed she had used Jeanne as a scapegoat to get out of paying for a necklace she couldn't afford. The affair of the diamond necklace, as it became known, cemented Marie Antoinette's reputation as a deceptive, extravagant, and morally corrupt figure. It didn't matter that she was innocent. The story was too good, and it confirmed every negative stereotype the public already held about her. The scandal seriously damaged the prestige of the monarchy just a few years before the revolution exploded. The non-gift of a diamond necklace ended up costing the queen her life. Number 9. What do you give the woman who gave you a kingdom? In 1704, John Churchill, the first Duke of Marlborough, won a decisive victory against the French at the Battle of Blenheim. It was a turning point in the War of the Spanish Succession and made Marlborough a national hero. His close friend and patron, Queen Anne, wanted to reward him with a gift worthy of his achievement. The gift was not jewels or money, but a palace. The Queen declared that a magnificent new house would be built for the Duke at the nation's expense. She gave him the royal manor of Woodstock in Oxfordshire as the site for his new home. The palace was to be named Blenheim in honor of his great victory. This was an extraordinary gift. The state was paying to build a private home for a subject, albeit the most important subject in the land. Parliament approved the funds, and the Queen appointed one of England's most brilliant architects, John Vanbrugh, to design it. The scale of the project was monumental. Blenheim Palace was intended to be not just a home, but a national monument. It was a celebration of British military power and a symbol of Marlborough's triumph. The construction began in 1705. It was a fraught and difficult process. The costs quickly spiraled out of control. The initial budget was around £40,000, but the final cost was closer to £300,000, a colossal sum for the time. The Duchess of Marlborough, Sarah Churchill, a formidable and notoriously difficult woman, constantly argued with the architect Vanbrugh over the design and the expense. She wanted a comfortable home. He was building a monumental symbol of victory. The political winds also shifted. The Duke and Duchess of Marlborough's friendship with Queen Anne was the foundation of their power, but they eventually had a bitter falling out. In 1712, the Marlboroughs fell from favor, and the Queen cut off all royal funding for the project. Construction on Blenheim halted. The Duke and Duchess went into exile on the continent. They only returned to England after Queen Anne's death in 1714. The new king, George I, was favorable to them. The Duke decided to complete the palace using his own considerable private fortune. It was finally finished after his death. Blenheim Palace is the only non-royal, non-episcopal country house in England to hold the title of palace. It is a masterpiece of English Baroque architecture, a vast and imposing structure set in over 2,000 acres of parkland landscaped by the famous Capability Brown. It is so large that it is often compared to Versailles. The gift that began as a national tribute from a grateful queen ended up being a source of political strife, financial worry, and personal conflict. It was a gift that outlasted the friendship that inspired it, but it remains today as a testament to one of the greatest military commanders in British history. It is also the birthplace and ancestral home of another famous leader, Sir Winston Churchill, a direct descendant of the first Duke. The gift from a queen to her general became a cradle of history. Number 8, can you give a gift that lasts 1,000 years? Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh of Egypt, was a prolific builder. During her reign in the 15th century BC, she commissioned hundreds of construction projects throughout Egypt. Among her most impressive and lasting gifts to the gods and to her own legacy were the 2 massive red granite obelisks she had erected at the Temple of Karnak in Thebes. Obelisks were tall, 4-sided, monolithic pillars that tapered to a pyramid-shaped point, or pyramidion, at the top. They were symbols of the sun god, Ra, and were incredibly difficult to create. First, a suitable vein of granite, free of flaws, had to be found at the quarry in Aswan, hundreds of miles to the south. Then, an army of workers would spend months carving the single piece of stone out of the bedrock using primitive tools like dolerite pounders and bronze saws. Hatshepsut's 2 obelisks were the tallest ever erected in Egypt at that time. Each was nearly 100 feet tall and weighed approximately 343 tons. Transporting these massive monoliths from Aswan to Thebes was a staggering feat of engineering. They were dragged from the quarry to the Nile River, loaded onto an enormous barge, and then floated hundreds of miles downstream. Inscriptions at Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahri detail the process, boasting that the obelisks were quarried in just 7 months. Once they arrived at Karnak, the largest religious complex in the ancient world, the obelisks had to be raised into a vertical position. This was done using a complex system of ropes, ramps, and manpower. The pyramidions at the very top were covered in electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, so they would catch the first and last rays of the sun and gleam across the city. These obelisks were a gift to the god Amun-Ra, the chief deity of Thebes, but they were also a powerful political statement. They were a very public and permanent declaration of Hatshepsut's power and her legitimacy as pharaoh. The inscriptions carved into the stone detail her coronation, her divine birth, and her relationship with the gods. They were designed to solidify her claim to the throne in a society where female rulers were rare. One of the obelisks remains standing at Karnak today, the tallest ancient obelisk still standing in its original position in Egypt. The other one broke in antiquity, and its upper section lies on the ground nearby. After Hatshepsut's death, her co-regent and successor, Thutmose III, tried to erase her from history. He had her name and image chiseled off monuments throughout Egypt. At Karnak, he couldn't tear down her massive obelisks, so he did the next best thing. He built a tall wall around them to hide them from public view. His attempt at erasure failed. The wall ironically protected the inscriptions on the lower parts of the obelisk from the elements, preserving them for posterity. Hatshepsut's gift, a testament to her ambition and power carved in granite, proved to be more durable than the efforts of the men who tried to forget her. It was a gift that quite literally stood the test of time. Number 7. How much is friendship worth in porcelain? In 1790, a magnificent and incredibly ambitious porcelain dinner service was commissioned from the Royal Copenhagen factory in Denmark. It was intended as a gift from the Danish crown Prince Frederik, acting as regent for his mentally ill father, King Christian VII, to Empress Catherine the Great of Russia. The gift was meant to be a masterpiece of diplomatic flattery. The service was called the Flora Danica. Its name and design were based on a famous botanical encyclopedia of the same name, which was a comprehensive survey of all the wild plants native to the Kingdom of Denmark. The idea was to hand paint every single piece of the dinner service with a different, scientifically accurate illustration of a Danish plant, taken directly from the encyclopedia. This was a project of almost insane detail and artistry. The chief artist was Johann Christoph Bayer. He and his team of painters had to meticulously copy the botanical illustrations onto the porcelain. Each plant had to be rendered with perfect accuracy from its leaves and flowers down to its roots. The Latin name of each plant was written on the back of the piece. The edges of the plates and dishes were decorated with delicate pink roses and gilded serrations. The service was designed to be enormous, with enough pieces for a banquet of 100 guests. It was to include not just dinner plates, but serving platters, tureens, salad bowls, ice cream coolers, and even tiny salt cellars, all decorated with unique plants. The project was expected to take years to complete. The craftsmen at Royal Copenhagen worked on the Flora Danica service for 12 years. They produced thousands of individual pieces, but in 1796, before the service was complete, Catherine the Great died. The original reason for the gift was now gone. The project was eventually halted in 1802. By that time, 1,802 individual pieces had been made. Since its intended recipient was dead, the service was instead delivered to the Danish royal house. Its first recorded use was for a banquet given by King Christian VII on his birthday in 1803. The Flora Danica has been a treasured possession of the Danish royal family ever since. It is considered one of the most important examples of porcelain from the golden age of the 18th century. It is a rare survivor. Most large-scale royal dinner services from that period have been broken up, sold off, or destroyed in wars and revolutions. The Flora Danica, however, remains almost entirely intact. About 1,530 pieces of the original service still exist. It is still used by the Danish royal family for very special state occasions and celebrations, such as weddings and anniversaries. A gift intended to cement a political alliance with a powerful foreign empress instead became the ultimate national treasure for the country that made it. The Flora Danica is a celebration of Denmark's natural world, a monument to the skill of its artisans, and a beautiful accident of history. Number 6. Can you wear the ocean? The Peregrina pearl is one of the most famous pearls in the world. It is a massive, perfectly symmetrical, pear-shaped pearl weighing nearly 56 carats. Its history spans almost 500 years and is a dramatic story of royalty, romance, and revolution. The pearl was found in the Gulf of Panama in the mid-16th century by an enslaved African man who was supposedly rewarded with his freedom for the discovery. It was brought to Spain and given to King Philip II. He, in turn, gave the pearl as a wedding gift to his new wife, Queen Mary I of England, also known as Mary Tudor. This was a political marriage meant to create an alliance between Catholic Spain and England. Queen Mary treasured the pearl. She wore it often, usually as a pendant on a brooch. It can be seen in several of her most famous portraits by the artist Antonis More. When Mary died childless in 1558, the pearl was returned to the Spanish crown, as per the terms of her marriage agreement. It remained one of the prized jewels of the Spanish monarchy for the next 250 years. It was worn by a succession of Spanish queens. In the early 19th century, during the Napoleonic Wars, France invaded Spain. Napoleon's older brother, Joseph Bonaparte, was installed as the King of Spain. When he was forced to flee the country in 1813, he took some of the Spanish crown jewels with him, including the Peregrina pearl. He later left the pearl to his nephew, the future Napoleon III of France. The pearl remained in the Bonaparte family for several decades. In the mid-20th century, it was sold to a Canadian family. Then, in 1969, the pearl came up for auction in New York. The actor Richard Burton bought it for $37,000. It was a Valentine's Day gift for his wife, the actress Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor loved the pearl, but was terrified of losing it. On one occasion, at a hotel in Las Vegas, the pearl vanished from its chain. After a frantic search, Taylor noticed one of her Pekingese puppies chewing on something. It was the Peregrina. Miraculously, the pearl was undamaged. Taylor felt the pearl's existing setting was not grand enough. She commissioned the jewelers at Cartier to design a new necklace for it. Inspired by a 16th century portrait of Mary, Queen of Scots, they created a spectacular necklace of pearls, diamonds, and rubies, with the Peregrina as the magnificent centerpiece. This is the setting in which the pearl is most famous today. After Elizabeth Taylor's death in 2011, her jewelry collection was auctioned off. The Peregrina pearl necklace sold for a record-breaking $11,800,000. The journey of this single pearl is a history of European power in miniature. It was a gift from a Spanish king to an English queen, a piece of loot for a French emperor, and finally a token of love for a Hollywood star. Each owner added a new chapter to its story, a new layer of glamour and intrigue. Number 5. What gift can turn a summer house into a navy? In the late 19th century, China was facing increasing pressure from Western powers and a modernizing Japan. The Qing dynasty, led by the powerful Empress Dowager Cixi, knew that the country needed to modernize its military, particularly its navy, to defend itself. Full funds were allocated to build a modern fleet of warships. At the same time, Cixi had a personal project she was passionate about. She wanted to rebuild and expand the imperial summer palace, known as the Garden of Perfect Brightness Yuan Ming Yuan, which had been destroyed by British and French forces during the Second Opium War in 1860. The destruction of the palace was a deep national humiliation, and Cixi wanted to restore its glory. The problem was a lack of money. The state treasury was strained, so a clever and deeply cynical plan was devised. The funds that were officially designated for naval development were secretly siphoned off to pay for the reconstruction of the Summer Palace, which was renamed the Garden of Nurtured Harmony Yiheyuan. This was done under the guise of building a naval yamen, or admiralty office, on the palace grounds, and holding naval drills on Kunming Lake within the palace. The result was that instead of a modern navy, the Empress Dowager got a spectacular new palace. The project was incredibly lavish. A huge man-made lake was expanded. Hills were built. Dozens of temples, pavilions, halls, and bridges were constructed. The most famous and most ironic structure built with the embezzled navy funds was the Marble Boat. It is a 2-story pavilion built of wood but painted to look like white marble, sitting on a stone base at the edge of the lake. It served no purpose other than as a beautiful and whimsical place for the empress to entertain. This gift that Cixi gave herself had catastrophic consequences for China. In 1894, war broke out with Japan over control of Korea. The new, modernized Japanese Navy faced the outdated and poorly equipped Chinese Beiyang fleet. The result was a disaster. The Chinese Navy was annihilated at the Battle of the Yalu River. China lost the war, lost control of Korea, and was forced to cede Taiwan to Japan. And the marble boat at the Summer Palace became a symbol of the corruption and short-sightedness of the late Qing dynasty. You know, the money that should have built real warships had been spent on a stone folly. The empress had her beautiful garden, but the nation had lost its defense. It was a gift that prioritized personal luxury over national security, and it cost the country dearly. Number 4, how can a single portrait contain a queen's entire world? Queen Elizabeth I of England was a master of propaganda. In an age without mass media, her image was carefully controlled and distributed through official portraits. These paintings were not just likenesses. They were complex webs of symbolism, designed to convey messages about her power, her wisdom, and her status as the Virgin Queen. The gifts depicted in these portraits were just as important as the Queen herself. Elizabeth loved receiving gifts, and her courtiers competed to give her the most elaborate and ingenious presents. A favorite gift was jewelry, and her portraits show her absolutely covered in pearls, rubies, and diamonds. Each jewel was often a gift with a specific meaning, or from a specific person. One of the most famous and symbol-laden of these paintings is the rainbow portrait, painted around 1600, when the Queen was in her late 60s. The portrait is a gift of propaganda, a carefully constructed image of eternal youth and divine power. In it, the elderly Queen is depicted as the ageless goddess Astrea. Her dress is embroidered with wildflowers, signifying her as the ruler of a flourishing kingdom. But the most striking gifts within the gift of the portrait are the symbols that adorn her. Her sleeve is decorated with a serpent, a symbol of wisdom. The serpent holds a heart-shaped ruby in its mouth, signifying that her wisdom controls her passions. Her headdress and cloak are covered in pearls, symbols of her virginity. Most bizarrely, her cloak is covered with embroidered eyes and ears. This was a clear message to her court and her enemies. It meant that the Queen sees and hears everything. It was a warning about the reach of her intelligence network and her spies. It was a gift of intimidation, a visual representation of her omniscience. In her right hand, she holds a rainbow, a symbol of peace. The inscription above it reads, "Non sine sol iris," no rainbow without the sun. The message is clear. The Queen is the sun, and she alone can bring peace to the land after the storms of war. The entire portrait is a gift, not from a suitor or a courtier, but from the Queen's government to its people in the world. It was a piece of political marketing. It presents an image of a monarch who is more than human, eternally young, all-seeing, all-wise, and the divine bringer of peace. The gifts shown on her person, the jewels, the serpent, the eyes and ears, are not just decorations. They are the building blocks of a carefully crafted political myth. The painting itself is the ultimate gift, the gift of an unshakable image of power. Number 3, could a single thread hold an empire together? The story of the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon in Jerusalem is found in the Bible and the Quran and has been elaborated in countless legends. It is a tale of two powerful monarchs testing each other's wisdom, and it revolves around an exchange of spectacular gifts. According to the story, the Queen of Sheba, ruler of a wealthy kingdom in southern Arabia, modern-day Yemen or Ethiopia, heard tales of the great wisdom of King Solomon of Israel. She decided to travel to Jerusalem to test him with hard questions and to see his famed kingdom for herself. She did not come empty-handed. She arrived with a massive caravan of camels bearing gifts of incredible value. The Bible states she brought 120 talents of gold and of spices, very great store, and precious stones. The spices, particularly frankincense and myrrh, which were grown in her kingdom, were also incredibly valuable in the ancient world, used for incense, perfumes, and medicine. The sheer scale of the gift was designed to impress Solomon and demonstrate the wealth and power of her own kingdom. This was not just a friendly present, it was an act of high-level diplomacy. The Queen of Sheba's kingdom controlled the lucrative trade routes for spices and incense. Solomon's kingdom controlled the major trade routes connecting Africa and Asia to the Mediterranean. The gift was the opening move in negotiating a trade alliance. It was a way of saying, "We are a kingdom of immense wealth. We are your equals. Let us do business." Solomon, in turn, impressed her with his wisdom, correctly answering all her difficult questions. He showed her his magnificent palace and the temple he had built. The story says that when she saw it all, there was no more spirit in her. She was completely overwhelmed by his wisdom and prosperity. In return for her gifts, Solomon gave unto the Queen of Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked, beside that which Solomon gave her of his royal bounty. The gift exchange was a success. It established a relationship of mutual respect and presumably a profitable trade partnership between the two kingdoms. Ethiopian tradition takes the story much further. In the Keber Negas, their national epic, the two monarchs have a son together, Menelik I, who becomes the first emperor of Ethiopia. He is said to have later visited his father and brought the Ark of the Covenant back to Ethiopia, where it is believed to be kept to this day. In this version, the gift exchange was not just about gold and spices, it was about the founding of a nation and a royal dynasty that would last for 3,000 years. The gift was a legacy. Number 2, how do you pay for a drink that costs a fortune? Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, was famous for her intelligence, her political skill, and her lavish lifestyle. She used displays of wealth as a tool of statecraft, a way to demonstrate the immense resources of Egypt to her powerful Roman allies and rivals. One of the most famous stories about her extravagance involves a bet she made with the Roman general Mark Antony. Antony was known for his love of luxury and excess. During one of his stays in Alexandria, he was boasting about the opulence of his banquets. Cleopatra, seeking to prove that her wealth was on an entirely different level, made a wager with him. She bet that she could host a single banquet that would cost 10 million sesterces. This was an astronomical sum, enough to feed a small army for a year. Antony, thinking this was impossible, accepted the bet. The next day, Cleopatra hosted a magnificent feast. It was luxurious, but Antony and his companions noted that it was not nearly extravagant enough to cost 10 million sesterces. As the meal was ending, Antony was beginning to mock her, believing he had won the bet. Then Cleopatra called for the second course. A servant brought her a single golden goblet filled with a strong vinegar or wine, in some accounts. This Cleopatra was wearing a pair of enormous pearl earrings. According to the Roman historian Pliny the Elder, they were the 2 largest pearls in the entire world, inherited from her ancestors. She took one of the earrings, dropped it into the goblet, and waited. The pearl, which was composed of calcium carbonate, slowly dissolved in the acidic liquid. When it was completely gone, she raised the goblet and drank the costly mixture. The value of that single pearl was estimated to be 10 million sesterces. She had won the bet with a single drink. She was about to dissolve the second pearl as well, but Lucius Plancus, the Roman who was acting as the judge of the wager, declared her the winner and stopped her from destroying the other one. This was not just a frivolous display of wealth, it was a calculated political act. Cleopatra was demonstrating to Antony and through him to Rome the incredible, almost limitless resources of Egypt. She was showing him that she could literally afford to drink a fortune. It was a message that Egypt was a prize worth having and that she was a ruler with the means to support her allies and crush her enemies. The gift she gave Antony was not the pearl itself, but a powerful and unforgettable lesson in economics and power. The dissolved pearl was a statement, do not underestimate me or my kingdom. Number 1. What is the true price of an empire? In 1876, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom was given a new title, Empress of India. This was not a gift of land or jewels. It was the gift of a title that formally bound the British monarch to the vast territories and diverse peoples of the Indian subcontinent. The idea came from her Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. The context was complex. The British had controlled large parts of India for over a century, first through the East India Company, and then after the rebellion of 1857, directly under the British Crown. But Victoria had never visited India and had no direct personal connection to it. At the same time, other European empires were growing. The rulers of Russia and Germany had recently adopted the title of emperor. Disraeli felt that making Victoria an empress would raise her status on the international stage and create a more formal, emotional link between Britain and its most important colony. Disraeli presented the idea to the Queen, and she was thrilled. She loved the grand, romantic sound of it. It appealed to her sense of imperial destiny. The Royal Titles Act was passed by the British Parliament in 1876, and Victoria officially became Empress of India. To celebrate this, a massive ceremony, the Delhi Durbar, was held in India in 1877. Victoria did not attend, but she was represented by the Viceroy, Lord Lytton. Hundreds of Indian princes, Maharajas, and Nawabs came to pay homage to their new empress. They brought extravagant gifts of jewels, silks, and gold. In return, they were presented with banners and medals bearing the empress's image. The gift of this title had a profound effect on Victoria. She began to see herself as the mother of the Indian people. She started learning Hindustani from her Indian servant Abdul Karim, whose close relationship with her caused a scandal in the royal household. She filled her homes with Indian art and artifacts. The title changed her own perception of her role in the world. But the gift of an empire was a heavy one. For the British, it was a source of immense wealth, power, and prestige. But for the people of India, it was a symbol of foreign domination. The title of Empress reinforced a system of colonial rule that exploited India's resources and suppressed its people's desire for self-determination. The Grand Durbars and the pageantry of empire masked the often brutal reality of British rule. The gift of the title was, in essence, a formalization of a conquest. It was a unilateral declaration by the colonizer. It cost Britain nothing to bestow this title on their queen, but the price for India was immense. The legacy of that gift, the legacy of the British Raj Box, is still being debated and grappled with today in both Britain and India. It shaped the modern world, creating deep connections and deep wounds that have not yet fully healed. It was perhaps the largest and most consequential gift ever given to a queen, a gift that was not a single object, but an entire subcontinent and the destiny of hundreds of millions of people.